Welcome to Suzanne's Cooking with the Saints. Today we're going to be talking about St. Patrick and baking Irish soda bread. And let me tell you about something about St. Patrick. He is one amazing man. There is a reason he is virtually known throughout the world. And the Irish Catholics that St. Patrick is actually responsible for have been an amazing force in the world. They celebrated so much when they came to the United States with parades and just all-out celebration because they were oppressed in Ireland. You could actually be executed in Ireland at one time when the British occupied for wearing this color scarf. The Wearin' of the Green is a song about this, and it's based on absolute truth. And don't let anybody tell you, oh no, they didn't do that. No, they absolutely did. Okay, so Irish soda bread is synonymous with St. Patrick's Day, and I think I've got the best Irish soda bread out there. I'm just gonna say it. That's what people have told me anyway. So let's begin. You've gotta have 3 cups of flour, and I'm using a sifter. Now, here's the thing. When you measure flour, I've actually seen some people on cooking shows just like dunk it in. You don't want to do that because you know what? You want to keep your baked goods kind of on the light side. So sort of fluff your flour beforehand, and then you just sort of drop it in. You kind of spoon it with, I'm using a scooper, but you do that and you don't press it down. Then you take a knife. I'm using this old frosting knife I've always used, and that's how you measure your flour. So we're gonna do that and get, measuring lightly there, 3 cups of flour. It's kind of relaxing to bake and measure flour. If you can get over your fear of baking, I'm telling you, it is an absolute gift to your family. It's an absolute gift to the world. And it's a gift to yourself too because everything tastes great. Okay, so 1/2 cup of sugar. We're gonna measure that off. Just sugar, it doesn't matter. You can pack that down. Okay, and now we do 3/4 teaspoon of salt, and I'm just gonna do it in a teaspoon and not just fill that teaspoon up all the way. So we've got that. Then we've got a teaspoon of soda, and it's kind of funny because it's called soda bread, but it's actually got more baking powder in it than baking soda. Go figure. Okay, we've got baking soda. I'm gonna do like a pinch more just because there were some lumps in there and it wasn't measuring out too smoothly. And then baking powder, we've got 2 teaspoons of that. 1, 2. And we do 1/4 teaspoon of cream of tartar. Hiding behind my buttermilk there. Oh, and you know what? I forgot to get the butter out. It'll only take me a second. Because I like to keep the butter cold before I'm going to make this. So I'm going to sift this and talk just a little bit about St. Patrick. So St. Patrick was born in 385, and he lived on the west coast of Ireland or Wales. We're not sure which. His father was a Roman governor, which would have been a position of power, and this was when the Romans were in Britain. His mother was known for her beauty, and she was actually Catholic. My helper's gonna get me the butter now. So we've sifted those ingredients. Patrick never, oh, thank you, good helper. We have a leprechaun in the kitchen. Anyway, so Patrick writes in the Confessions of St. Patrick, which is really why we know about St. Patrick, that he never really took his faith that seriously. Okay, there are a lot of people who can relate to that. And it's interesting when you look at Patrick's life, because when did he begin taking his faith seriously? Suffering. Okay, this is true of us all. It's true of me. I know so many people who convert when they begin to suffer. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's how God uses suffering, not in the mean way. And I'm not saying all suffering is from God. It's allowed by God because we live in a fallen world. But I'm saying this is how God does draw good out of suffering, because it gets people to come to him, okay? And that's what he wants. We'll talk about that, hopefully, in just a couple of seconds, because that's an important message. But anyway, so one day St. Patrick was walking along the beach, and lo and behold, Irish pirates saw him and went ashore and kidnapped him, because they were getting people to sell into slavery in Ireland, which is exactly what they did to him. They took him to County Antrim and sold him into slavery. Now, he was sold to a master who did not treat him well. I'm cutting this butter into, I go like link, link, link. I probably got 7 links. And then I flip it, and then I do some more. So what I'm going for are little chunks of butter. But back to St. Patrick. So he was sold to a master who did not care for him, meaning give him good food or good clothing. He was a slave. He was treated terribly. And St. Patrick writes in his own confessions, "But after I came to Ireland, I was employed tending sheep, and I prayed, I was employed tending sheep, and I prayed frequently during the day, and the love of God and his faith and fear," interesting, that's the beginning of wisdom. The Bible tells us, fear of the Lord, and fear increased in me more and more, and the spirit was stirred, so that in a single day I have said as many as 100 prayers, and at night nearly the same. Though I remained in the woods and on the mountains, even before dawn, I was roused in prayer. In snow and ice and rain, I felt no injury from it, nor was there any slothfulness in me, as I see now, because my soul was then fervent. All right? So I don't know if you've ever been up against it. I have. And I've awakened so many times at night in prayer. And I always think of St. Patrick when I do that, because he was doing the same thing. Human suffering is human suffering. And he was praying and praying to God. And there's no prayer that doesn't go, I should say, that goes unheard by God. And so in Patrick's case, that was true. Now, I've got one of these. If you don't have one of these, I'd suggest getting one eventually. But you can also use your hands. But I take this, and now I am working the butter into the flour. And what you're going for are, pea-sized chunks. You just don't want that butter, like here were some big butter chunks, okay? So this is like the size you want, even a little smaller. That's what you're working down. But I'd already cut it into little pieces, and so, it's working in really fast, which is great. And I'm gonna take my hand, I'm gonna get any chunks of butter off there. I mean, butter is gold. The Irish love their butter, and my son told me this saying that what cannot be cured, or what butter and whiskey cannot cure, cannot be cured. And so the Irish dairy farmers know all about that, and I actually descend from Irish dairy farmers in County Kerry. Okay, so we've got that worked in. And then, ideally, I would have a kitchen knife. I don't know if my leprechaun can come get me a kitchen knife. Just a regular one from the regular set. But a kitchen knife, I think, is great to stir it with. And I'm going to leap over here and get a scraper. I also forgot to do that. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So, okay, so now we're going to pour in, we did the 1/3 cup of butter. We're going to do 1½ cups of buttermilk. And we take a knife and we just kind of move it around, back and forth. You don't want to super stir this. It's just, in some respects, you could say Irish soda bread is a family member to biscuits. And so, you know, as you don't want to overwork biscuits, you don't want to work your Irish soda bread dough. So you just stir this with a knife. I learned that from Mary Berry. I don't know if Mary Berry makes Irish soda bread because she's English, but she does mix things up with a knife when she doesn't want a super mix. Okay, boom, every drop of buttermilk. Okay, so meanwhile, back to St. Patrick. So he was praying at night, and God was hearing his prayers. And so one night he was awakened by a voice, and the voice said to him, get up, or the voice said to him, you have prayed and fasted well. That's interesting, okay? Because God was rewarding Patrick's faithfulness and recognizing it. And so the voice said, you have prayed and fasted well. Get up and go to the coast where a ship is waiting. Now, this is an example of trusting God. Obviously, hopefully most of us don't hear voices that much. So St. Patrick obviously didn't, and he recognized God was speaking to him. And so he acted on it, because he could have put God in a box. He could have not trusted God, because to the coast was 200 miles away. And if he'd gotten caught on the way to the coast, right now I'm kind of not really stirring, but I'm sort of just moving this about, turning it a bit, but again, gently. The one thing I'm going to say is, fear the Lord, but don't ever fear dough. I mean, it's like you're the boss of this dough, and some people, it's like, oh, don't overwork the dough, and then it's almost like, I don't even know if I should be touching this dough. You don't want to have that attitude. So I'm just saying, overworking dough means like really stirring it, or obviously you wouldn't use a mixer with this. Okay, so anyway, St. Patrick, if he had been caught, I don't know if I mentioned this, he would have been executed, because he was a slave, and if he was caught leaving his master, executed on the spot. So it was risky. But obviously, God knew what he was doing, and St. Patrick trusted him. Okay, I'm pouring this out on a floured board. And what I do is I sort of make the center, that's where I put all the dry flour. There's dry flour that didn't really get incorporated. So I do that in the center, because we're going to need this gently, even though we're not afraid of it. Okay, so he gets to the coast, he makes it, and he sees men in a rowboat getting ready to push out into the ocean and go aboard a ship. And these men are there, they're taking Irish wolfhounds to be sold on the mainland. And so St. Patrick, who's Patrick just at this time, asks them, can I have passage aboard your ship? And what do they say? No. So there is a real spiritual lesson here. First, I'm going to flour my hands, and then I'm going to tell you the spiritual lesson. The spiritual lesson is that Patrick did not get in a fight with them, didn't argue. What do you mean, no? God told me I was going to get passage on a ship. I'm using this to toss it up, but you can use your hands. And what I'm doing is I'm just kind of folding it over. Basically, you just don't want to have like a bunch of dry flour in there that's not incorporated, okay? So what did St. Patrick do? Huge lesson for us all in the spiritual life. Didn't get into an argument. He removed himself and immediately began to pray. By removed himself, it just means that, you know, he stepped back a little and immediately went into prayer. And then, before he had even finished his prayer, the men were calling to him All right, we'll let you go on the ship. Is that God? Yeah, that's God. So he goes aboard the ship, and then the ship starts off, and it's almost practically like St. Paul. Then the ship runs aground. Okay, I think that's mixed up well. We can see we've got this great little circle of great dough. And the thing about soda bread is that it flattens out a little bit as it bakes. So you kind of want it to be like this. So before I move it, I'm going to finish this part. So anyway, the ship ran aground and everyone was starving. So St. Patrick explained the Trinity to the men, and he said, if you will cry out to the true God and repent of your sins, he will rescue us. So again, suffering, the men were like, okay, we're starving to death. What have we got to lose? They cried out to God, they repented of their sins, and then God sent a herd of animals into their midst so they could eat. And so Patrick made it home. It was a glorious homecoming. I mean, you can imagine. His parents, it wasn't like there was communication. They had no idea what had happened to him. And then he returns. I mean, it would literally be like, being born again, coming back from the dead, so to speak. Okay, so I've got a buttered pizza pan here, but you can use a cookie sheet. You can use whatever, just, a cookie sheet, jelly roll pan, whatever works for you. And I'm going to pick this up and I'm going to put it on there. And again, you can use your hands if you want to do that. So I'm going to get every little bit off there. Why? Because why leave it on the stuff you're going to wash? So anyway, Patrick is home. His parents are overjoyed. They can't believe it. And then he has a dream. And in the dream, an angel appears to him. And the angel, the voice, the angel hands him a letter, and he opens the letter in his dream, and it says, a voice spoke, and it said, "Youth, holy youth, come and walk amongst us once more." And it's referred to as the voice of the Irish. And so Patrick, this is interesting, did not want to go back to Ireland for obvious reasons. Ireland was in the control of the Druids at that time, and the Druids were pagans. Let's just leave it at that. Anyway, so he didn't want to go back, but you know what? He was loyal to God. He knew the only reason he'd gotten out was because of God. And so he went to France to go to seminary. He trained under Saint Germain. Saint Germain gave him a lot of experience because Saint Germain was working in France combating heresies. So Patrick learned how to evangelize the faith and explain the faith, specifically the Trinity. And so then Pope Celestine I consecrated Patrick a bishop and actually gave him the commission to return to Ireland and convert the Irish. And if you know anything about the Irish, I say this being Irish, that's no small task. I mean, the Irish are an interesting race. They can be extremely stubborn. It's why Irish, when they go the good way, are great, great saints. But it says, the saying goes that when the Irish go bad, they're the worst. So he went back to Ireland and with his monks, and this is God's timing, okay? It was right around Easter. And so he landed with his monks. They got the lay of the land. Tara was the citadel or the fortress of Ireland. It was the highest point in Ireland. And so the Druids had Ireland in lockdown. They were the pagan priests, and they were getting ready to celebrate their festival of the sun. Prior to that, though, for quite a while, no light was allowed to be lit in Ireland. So that meant no cooking fires, no lights, nothing. The only way that that was restored was that the Druids went to Tara and they built a big fire, and then that was the signal to everybody in Ireland. Okay, they've started the Feast of the Sun Worship Day, and so we can cook warm food again. So anyway, the Druids were gathered at Tara. The Irish kings, the king of Tara was there. Bairds were there. Bairds are very high in power in Ireland and Irish history. They were like the keeper of the history of Ireland, and the Irish take their history very seriously. Anyway, so St. Patrick and his monks went to the Hill of Tara, and they built an enormous bonfire. Okay, well, this was like, say what? I mean, everyone was like, wait a minute, the Druid priests are here. Who's building that fire? We're going to go out there because whoever did it is going to be put to death. So the Druid priests, the king, all his court, the Bairds that were there, all went to the top of the hill and to see who had lit this fire. Well, St. Patrick was there with his monks. And so he explained to them, he said, the sun which you behold rises and sets by God's decree for our benefit, but it shall never reign, nor shall its splendor be immortal. All who adore it shall miserably perish, but we adore the true Son, Jesus Christ, and whoever so believes in him will never perish because they will have eternal life. Well, this was a huge turning point. Now, I should tell you, they didn't just go to the top of Ireland and build a fire. They planted a cross, a giant cross on that hill before they lit the fire. This is Patrick and his monks. Okay, so speaking of cross, I'm going to make a cross on the top of our Irish soda bread, and whenever I do it, I always pray this prayer. I always say, may God bless all in this house. That's an Irish prayer that Irish people pray whenever they go into somebody's house in Ireland. I hope they still do it, but they used to, okay? So there's a cross in the top of the bread. Some people refer to it as an X. It's a cross. Anyway, Patrick the conversions began after he said this. The head Baird converted on the spot. Okay, that's the Holy Spirit. Then the king's brother converted the next day, and then it began, all right? But Patrick would then work in Ireland for the next 29 years, converting Ireland, but he was in grave danger because the Druids, didn't like him messing with their system because, hey, they were Druid priests. They had the power. This guy's coming in. He's taking everybody from us. This has been a problem anytime Catholicism has gone up against the pagans. The Roman Empire was like this. Jesus was like this when he went up against the powers, in Jerusalem, the Romans and the Jews. He threatened their entire power structure. All right, so Patrick was going up and down the breadth of Ireland. If you are Catholic, if you are Irish Catholic, you can trace your Catholic faith directly back to St. Patrick. And it's never too late to reconnect to it. That's what I had to do. Okay, so St. Patrick, due to the fact he was in danger from these Druids who always were trying to kill him, composed the Breastplate of St. Patrick. It's a prayer that surrounded him. And this is the short version. There's a much longer version, but this is the short version. And it says, Christ be with me, Christ within me, Christ behind me, Christ before me, Christ beside me, Christ to win me, Christ to comfort and restore me, Christ beneath me, Christ above me, Christ in quiet, Christ in danger, Christ in hearts of all that love me, Christ in mouth of friend and stranger. And St. Patrick would pray this prayer every day before he went out to convert Ireland. And he did it. And it's an amazing thing. And he did so much good because of it. Because as I said at the beginning, the Irish Catholics have been a huge force for good in the world, and we need to reclaim our heritage. I'm going to bake this now for 45 minutes in a 350-degree oven. See, that's what it looks like. Okay, 45 minutes in the oven. This is what it looks like. Now, I covered it about 10 minutes before it was done, loosely. You don't want to trap moisture in there. I literally opened the oven door, put a piece of foil over it so it didn't over brown, because this oven is a new oven and it really bakes things. Okay, so a little bit faster. I say that, and yet it still takes 45 minutes. So I'm just telling you, watch it. And if you think that, you know, it's looking brown like this, just throw that little piece of foil on it. Now, one thing I forgot to tell you, which is almost one of the most important parts of the story about St. Patrick and God's timing. When he went with his monks to Ireland, it was before Easter. I said they got the lay of the land, but when they planted the cross on Tara and lit the huge fire, it was Easter Eve. Easter Eve! I mean, it's so amazing. It's so symbolic. Okay, so I'm going to show you, this is here. I'm going to show you how to make the glaze. Now, I've changed this a little since my cookbook. I always like to improve everything, but the other thing that happened in our family was one of our children became not allergic to milk, but they just can't, well, maybe she is allergic to milk. She just can't drink milk, can't eat cheese, etc. So the recipe in everything I've told you is from the Building the Family Cookbook, and the recipe in there calls for powdered sugar and milk to be added, but I switched it up due to the fact she couldn't have milk anymore. So I melted 2 tablespoons of butter in the microwave, and then I do about 2 cups of powdered sugar. Now I'm going to tell you something about powdered sugar. Due to the fact that there are some people still out there who don't have food allergies. I practically don't know anybody, but I mean, there's some people. Long story short, due to the fact they have genetically modified so much of the food, corn is genetically modified unless it's certified organic. Okay, that means they've put Roundup herbicide into the corn plant so they can spray the field for weeds, and the corn doesn't die because it's resistant to it, Roundup resistant. Okay, well, corn starch is in powdered sugar. So corn starch, corn products, they make me sick, they make some of my children sick. So I use organic powdered sugar because corn starch is in powdered sugar. So I now use organic cornstarch. I use organic corn syrup. If I use corn syrup, I buy organic corn, organic popcorn. Yeah, pretty much that's what I have to do because otherwise it just makes us sick. And that might be going on with you too. I don't know. But anyway, so this is made with organic powdered sugar. All right, so then I've got my little Irish pitcher since it's St. Patrick, and I'm gonna start out by adding a tablespoon of water. The reason this is a great glaze is that the butter causes it to just solidify when it's on the soda bread. I'm gonna go with maybe a tablespoon and a half. Let's see how it's mixing up. I'm putting it all in there because I think I may have had a little bit more powdered sugar. Okay, great. This is the perfect consistency. I'm going to show you what that looks like. Not kind of thick runny is what I would say. Okay, so I also made another one after I put the big one in the oven and I made little ones. So in other words, I took the dough like you saw me make, made another one, and then I divided it in fourths and then made little round loaves, put the cross on them, and those I'm going to use to give as gifts. So I like using, it's any kind of brush, but I use this silicone brush. I use my other brush for like an egg wash. It's more like a little paint brush, but I kind of like this, but it would work fine too. So you just literally brush this on, and it's nice to coat it because you're going to see, one, how much prettier it looks, two, it tastes amazing, and three, it keeps it fresh because it's got that coating on there. Now, I should also tell you that when the Irish arrived in the United States, they were met with great prejudice. And I have a sign in my kitchen that is kind of a joke because we're of Irish descent. My husband is also of Irish descent. But it says, "Help wanted, no Irish need apply," which in this house is pretty much true. No one does apply. Anyway, this is dated October 12th, 1916. That's an actual sign, all right, that stores would put in their store window, "Help wanted, but don't come in and apply if you're Irish." The other thing was that they would abbreviate it in newspaper ads after they did the "Help Wanted" announcement, and it was abbreviated Nina because they wanted to save money and didn't want to do "No Irish Need Apply," so it was abbreviated to Nina because then everybody knew "Help Wanted, no Irish need apply." So the Irish really overcame a lot in the United States. They got a foothold, and it's pretty amazing. They were extremely devout people, and I think we've lost a lot of that with Irish Catholics. I mean, I had this friend whose last name is very Irish, and their daughter didn't even know they were Irish. She asked if it was a Polish last name. So, I mean, it just shows we've kind of lost our heritage, and I think it's good to reclaim this with your children. It's good for them to understand that Irish people faced tremendous prejudice, and they had a lot to overcome, and they worked hard. And they sent their children to good schools, and the children who went to the good schools worked hard, and then they became Irish success stories. But it was not easy at all. And in fact, when Irish people first got here, I mean, a lot of men who were qualified to do other things had to take the job of ditch digger. I mean, that's how tough things were, and the welcome mat definitely was not out. Now, the other thing that I want to share with you, and that a lot of people watching this already know, is that I used to have a terrible weight problem, and I used to weigh 100 pounds more than I do now, and I wrote a program called The Lightway, Lightweig. And the Lightway, or lightway.com, is where you can go if you're interested in getting the Saints Feast Day cookbooks that I've written. But I, using the Lightway, overcame my struggle with food. And so now I eat food like this. I don't have to eat diet food. I eat great food. I teach people how to do it. We have Zoom programs going that have caused a lot of success to take place for people. I mean, people say they're more successful than they've ever been. It's a Bible study. You learn about the saints. You learn a rock fact about the Catholic faith. And then we have a topic for every week. But it's a program that helps you go through the process of getting what we call peace with food. And so peace with food means you get to a place where you can still enjoy food. You have detachment, and that means that you have control of yourself. Like, I'm faced with warm soda bread, but it's not like, oh, I've got to eat it now, I've got to eat it now. No, I don't. I can have it whenever I want to. That's detachment. And so I never thought it would be possible for me, but by God's grace, He's the one who gets all the credit for everything good in the light way. It is possible, and it's possible for you too. So if you've enjoyed learning about St. Patrick, today he was in my first cookbook, which I wrote, oh my gosh, how many years ago did I write these? A long time. Well, I don't know, I could look. But anyway, the point is, when is the copyright on this? 2003. So my first cookbook, full of saints. Then I wrote a second cookbook. I think I finished that maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And I'm getting ready to come out with a third cookbook. But if you're interested in finding out how you can learn weight loss from the comfort of your own home over Zoom, you can go to lightway.com, lightweigh.com, and we've got the cookbooks on there, and you can find out about Lightway, which is the road to faith and freedom. So I'm going to show you those little loaves in just a minute. So I've got the 4 little Irish soda breads that I want to show you. They pretty much cook the same amount of time. The one thing I will say is that it's nice because if you want to, see, I've got some more glaze here. You can add just a little bit more water if you make your glaze in advance and then stir it up. And it becomes brushable really fast once again. Plus the heat of these is going to cause it to spread easily. But these are nice because you can, if you live by yourself, you can make a little Irish soda bread for yourself. You might, these can be just a nice little gift to somebody. Like I'm gonna take one over to my mother-in-law. She lives by herself, and so she might not want a whole loaf, but a little loaf will be just perfect for her. Or teacher's gifts. This soda bread, I'm just going to tell you, the recipe dates back to 1870s Ireland. And I'm the only person I've ever known to glaze their soda bread. And we don't put raisins in our soda bread. We don't like raisins. We like raisins separately. I wouldn't say we're big raisin people, but we don't put them in our soda bread. I always say we're from County No Raisin. And anyway, the glaze and you'd think, oh, it's going to make it too sweet. It doesn't, and you can thin it out more than if you want to. And I always think, well, I'm doing this when it's warm, and then that kind of causes it to go thin. This one I was talking, so it sort of went thick because it was cooling down before I was glazing it. But anyway, the point is that you think, oh, this will be too sweet. I serve this with corned beef and cabbage on St. Patrick's Day. I serve it with, there's the timer. I knew that was going to happen. That shows, though, that it was probably 5 minutes less than the 45 minutes for the little loaves because I just took those out. So, meaning, and there was still 5 minutes on the timer. But anyway, what was I saying? Oh, I serve it with corned beef and cabbage. I serve this with the Irish pub dinner, which I'm going to make in one of these cooking examples. That's an amazing I'm gonna tell you, everybody loves that dinner, but men love that dinner. I mean, I'm not kidding. If you're trying to convince someone to marry you, make the Irish pub dinner. It'll work every time. But anyway, so I serve this with those savory meals, and it's not too sweet. My family loves it, and I always serve it with butter. And I do have to credit the expression or the phrase, what butter and whiskey cannot cure, cannot be cured, is from my son, or our son Patrick. So he's our little Irish historian there. But anyway, so you've got now, of course, I've walked off with my spatula. Those big spatulas, I got one for my birthday from my family. How many times did I ever get to use the one I got for my birthday? Goose egg. I'm not even kidding. Every time I go to use the spatula, it's gone. Someone's used it to make their eggs. Someone's used it to make this, blah, blah, blah. So I went to the store and I bought another one. And here, I can just get it off with my hands. So this is very pretty little presentation. You can see that. Whoops, there's your baby loaf. Your little baby Irish soda loaf. Soda bread loaf. And you could even do that for your grandchildren. They could even, you know, little Irish soda breads. It could be a gift. However you want to use that. But St. Patrick's Day is part of Irish Catholic history, and St. Patrick is and was an amazing man, an amazing saint, and proclaim him. He deserves to be remembered. And when you wear green on St. Patrick's Day, remember that there was a time in Ireland where if you wore that green, you'd be hanged by the British. And it's the absolute truth. All right, that's all for now, precious ones. Tune in to the next cooking example. And remember, if you want to find out about Lightway or order these Saints Feast Day cookbooks, go to lightway.com, lightweigh.com. Thanks for tuning in, and give us a thumbs up if you can. That would be awesome.